And we are live. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our bi-weekly series with Sakina Issa. If this is the first time you're tuning in with us, this is part of a mini series that we've done every other Friday, just talking about different subtopics under the main topic of just self-improvement and growth. And Sakina Issa provides her professional opinion and advice on how to navigate self-growth and take it to the next level. And if you were with us in the previous weeks, welcome back, and thank you for staying with us through the series. And so today we just wanted to go over a more generic but also much needed and not enough talked about topic, which is breaking the stigma of therapy, getting comfortable with, just getting comfortable with the word, the concept, and not thinking that it's something that everybody else does, and it might be something that we might need in our own lives, and why that's okay. That doesn't mean anything bad. So I'll just let Sakina Issa do a quick little refresher intro on herself, and then I'll start asking all the questions.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Welcome back, and hello to those of you who are new here. My name is Sakina Issa. 5 years ago, I got my degree, my master's at UCF for marriage and family therapy, and since then, I've just been on this journey to establish myself and trying to get licensed. So I'm not licensed yet, but I'm pre-licensed. So I'm just, continuing to learn and grow. And so I have a private practice in Orlando, Florida. I do online therapy as well. So you can check out my website, sakinaissa.com, if you want to know a little bit more about me, my journey, what I'm all about, or if you're interested in therapy for yourself.
Thank you. So just as a starter, going off of how you introduce yourself, so you said you're not fully licensed, but you still do counseling services. So can you explain us the difference and how still you're able to help people?
So it's like as if when you're becoming a doctor, right? There's this period of time where you're just pre-licensed, and so what that means is that you have a supervisor whom you hire to check in with, and so it's mandated by the state to check in with the supervisor at least every 2 weeks or every 10 clients. So I see my supervisor probably weekly because I do see that many more than that in my office each week. And it's just like a check-in source to make sure, I'm doing a good job. If I ever get stuck, I have support. And just really, it just creates like this network for you ultimately, so that even when I do finish, this pre-licensure period, I have someone to go to and someone that I can rely on, who I've established rapport with and who knows me and knows my style of counseling.
Amazing. Thank you. So would you say that if someone is sort of, and we'll get into more like the stigma part of therapy, but since we're on the topic of the therapists themselves, would you say that if you do come across a therapist that's relatively newly graduated, how does a patient sort of navigate that? Is that something to be worried about, or is there's like a minimum amount of stuff that you have to do before you even start practicing anyways, right?
Right, of course. So, like, I did my master's, so that was 3 years. When you do your master's, then automatically part of the program is counseling. So, even before I graduated, I was already counseling because they have a facility. And it's actually really cool when you're in school because you are in a room with video cameras. There's clients who have signed up. It's obviously pro bono and it's research based. It allows the university to do research on counseling, and it allows the student to learn in the most amazing way, honestly, because you're videotaped and you're recorded. So obviously it's free to the client because, they are helping us out at school. And then part of the curriculum is that you have to watch yourself. And then you have to transcribe everything you and the client says. And so in that way, it's like hours and hours and hours of like, just you gain so much awareness because you're critiquing yourself. Obviously, your professor is also looking at these, and it's like weekly for the whole semester. And you actually go through it twice, so it's actually 2 semesters where you do this, and it's amazing because you can actually see yourself grow and get better and get more confident, use the techniques and the skills. It's very interesting. I don't know if anybody's ever recorded themselves and then watched it, and like sometimes you cringe. So you have the opportunity to like grow and be like, okay, I didn't say that in the most effective way. Or sometimes, as a therapist, you get triggered. You hear stories and it's just like so disheartening, and you can easily get caught off guard. And so, learning how to bring yourself back and work through it yourself if you are triggered by something, or, maybe something's brought up that you still need to work on yourself. And so it really creates that awareness. And then from there you go and you do internship. So I actually did my internship with people who get DUIs and they're mandated to counseling. And so that was a crazy experience because you meet so many different types of people, and they don't choose to be in therapy. And so it's very difficult to get that buy-in. They don't want to be there. They don't think they have to be there. And they're almost forced to be there if they want to get their license back. So that was so challenging, but like so rewarding because I learned so much in that. And I did group counseling and individual counseling, and I worked for this amazing facility. And then from there, I worked with children. So my first kind of job was with children and doing home visits and school visits. And that was really rewarding, but ultimately it didn't fit my needs in terms of scheduling. And so that's when I really decided I need to open my private practice. And so they do allow you to open a private practice while you're pre-licensed because you see your supervisor. And, there's continuing education throughout the whole thing. So I've been participating in that. And then also, in order to get licensed, you need to meet a 1,500-hour requirement. So I'm almost done. So I'm happy to say that. And I'm really excited because, of course, I can't wait to get licensed. That would be such a great, big moment for me. But that's basically the difference. So the good thing is that because I'm pre-licensed, like I'm aware that people are not going to be as confident in turning to me, right? And so that allows me to really, turn on everything within myself to make sure I am so present and I'm just delivering in a way that I need to be.
So you're able to gain that trust with your clients. But I love that part of your master's and the build up to your pre-license, it has that buffer zone, right? Like where you get that hands-on experience, but at the same time, like you said, if there's anything that is triggering you as a therapist, you can sort that out before you see actual clients.
Right.
So I think that's a great,
therapists too. And it's something that like you can't advocate for something if you haven't participated in it. So I had to go in willing to like break my own stigmas that were, there that, okay, this is so weird. I have to be the client. But I absolutely love it. And it was such an amazing experience.
No, I think that's great. Well, thank you for explaining that difference. So I guess to start off, as you are relatively newer in terms of like the space and perhaps in your area, as people find you, what do you think are the most common, frequently asked questions or things that people are hesitant about when it comes to therapy? What would you say are the top 2 questions that you get?
So I think that people really mistake therapy with advice. So therapy is not advice. So it's very different if, you kind of go to your friends and you talk about your problems and you get advice. A therapist will hone on the skills that you already have, evaluate them, see what they are, and then see the skills that you'll need to tackle your problem and then present them, right? And so you have to be open to talking, right? So you have to be very comfortable with the therapist. So number one thing I tell everybody I meet, everybody does not get along, right? Certain personalities just don't click. And that's the reality of it. We wish we got along with everybody and we were so like just nice. And that's just not reality. So not necessarily are you going to get along with me or am I going to get along with you? And so when you look for a therapist, check out their website, see just get a sense, like even just kind of sometimes like the branding that somebody chooses, is it attractive to you or not? Um, Look at the skill set that they have, look at the specialty in a sense, and you do that initial. You might have to go to a few therapists' office. The first session is where you'll really get to know whether you like them or you don't like them. You can ask them questions. So it's inappropriate to ask a therapist personal questions, but it's very appropriate to ask them about their education, their beliefs in terms of therapy, what kind of therapy they practice, what do they believe helps people. That'll allow you to gauge whether you're a right fit for them.
And
Other
sorry.
questions
Yeah.
that are frequently asked is, how do I know therapy is working? Like, how do I know it'll work? And that's because a therapist will make a treatment plan for you,
Okay.
and they'll understand your goals and what you're looking to solve and work with you through that. And so that is like the marker of whether it's working or it's not working. But always keeping in mind that a therapist will never work harder than you do. Where there's
like personally what you put in.
Exactly, but it's 1 hour or 45 minutes a week. Maybe you go twice a week. And it doesn't matter because so many hours you're not with us, right? So what are you doing outside a session? Are you putting the work in? And really evaluating that is really important too. Some other frequently asked questions. What can I expect during my first visit? There's always paperwork. We have confidentiality statements. We have consent forms. We have like informational psychosocials, which just allow us to gather information. The more information we know about you, your past is really important. Everyone's like, why do you look in the past? That's so annoying. Well, our past shapes our future, right? And I think in previous sessions that we've had together, we've mentioned how the things that we've gone through shape our perspective. So it's important for a therapist to understand if you've had any trauma, how many people are in your family. Has your family experienced divorce? You might not know it, but it does shape who you've become.
So when you said that, like, finding the right chemistry, right? That's like such a big part of finding the right therapist for you. So would you say it's normal to go to a few or a handful of therapists in the beginning and then decide on one? Or is there something like being too picky? Like how do you know when you click? I guess it's like, I don't know, like finding a friend that you click with.
It's just like you'll feel comfortable. It's so funny because I've had like older people come into my office and they'll be like, you're so young. Like, do you know anything? And by the end of it, they're impressed, right? So you might not know that you'll click with somebody until you really experience them. And so, yeah, if you have to go to a few, that's fine. And maybe let's have a marker. Maybe you pick 4, right? Because if you're picking 10, then maybe you are too picky, right? If you are doing the work beforehand at looking at their websites and reading about them and knowing their perspective, then I think it's safe to say that like 4 different people should be contenders. And then if you're moving past that, look within yourself and then evaluate, what was it about those therapists that I didn't like? Because sometimes people don't like therapists because they call them out on what's really going on and they're not ready to acknowledge it. And then so you have to ask yourself that too. Am I ready to engage in therapy? Or maybe I'm just not ready for that change.
Yeah, true. That's a good point. And you're right. It just goes back to like sometimes you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a big part of it. Yeah. So say someone decides and understands that they need to go to therapy. How, like, if someone has the issue of explaining it to their family, that like I think one of the biggest stigmas of therapy is, like you said, it's not necessarily advice, and family feels like they can give that advice. It's more honing in on other things. And how do they explain their family? Like, what are some good tips on explaining, whether it's their sibling, their spouse, their parents, that they're not psycho, and okay, maybe they're miserable, they need to figure it out, but I think family receives that on an exponential degree sometimes than what it really is. So what are some tips for that?
So some tips for that. So I've had clients who have not told their parents. They come and they're like, listen, like they don't understand it. But I'm going to do it anyway. And then when I see change, then I'll approach them, right? Because that's how they feel comfortable. But if you feel comfortable, if you want to, start that dialogue, I think a great place is just the research done. There's so much research that shows that counseling has helped patients with cancer or any chronic illnesses. And research from Stanford University has shown that, excuse me, I'm kind of just going back in my brain, but that a person who has experienced therapy is better off than a person who hasn't experienced therapy. So that's like a great place to start because people just find it to be like, oh, just sitting on a couch and talking, like you can do that at home. Why are you paying for that? But you're really paying for a safe experience. The reality is that the people around us have had the opportunity to hurt us and impact us. And we've had, just like a lot of experiences with them and a lot of different ones, right? They're not the same. And so they can never provide what a therapist provides because number one, it's totally confidential, right? You have the security that nothing is ever going to get out. Number two, you're in a non-judgmental environment. You can tell me anything and I have no reason to judge you because it doesn't directly impact me.
I think you've said this a lot before on your page and our page that you're not like involved. You're the third party that's just a separate pair of eyes and ears, right?
Right. And so that's like so important. And then also just the environment that you provide is like, I'll put certain things in my office just so that because I know it'll help a person calm down and like it's just a relaxing environment. It's very, I have plants in my office. I use essential oils and it's just an environment that you don't necessarily have at home. Right. And so when you explain to somebody that, you can also explain them those things, right? That it is different and you might not understand and that's okay. Right. And it's not our job to make everybody okay with therapy. It's our job to work on ourselves and make sure we're okay with therapy.
And I do like that it's about the safe, sacred space that you're creating and having that separate to your home. I think even just like in because of COVID, a lot of people have realized like boundaries, right? Like whether you work from home or no matter how big or small your house is, work and home has become a blurry boundary. And again, no matter how big your space is, it's still annoying, right? That those boundaries. So sometimes you need that fresh new space. And sorry.
It's so funny that you said that because I'm having that difficulty. I do these lives from home. So I'm like, everybody go on that side of the house. Like, can you leave? Can you go out? Like, I just need space.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And I think another way, like you said, you're doing it for yourself. So it doesn't need to be everybody's business. But if you do need to open that dialogue, those are great ways to facilitate that dialogue. And I think sometimes it's also, whether it's statistics or creating an analogy for people in a way that they understand, right? That like, whether it's like boiling mental health down to the words good mood to explain it to someone or, a good day or a bad day, people can understand that like when you wake up and have a good day, it's, your day is that much better. The whole day it like filters through and it's like an analogy for if you're in a good mental state, if you've worked on yourself, the rest of your life navigates and you're already like stepping up to a healthier mental state to navigate your life, right?
You're absolutely right.
Sometimes it's the like analogies or drawing that lines, like you said, with statistics to help people understand. So I think that those are actually really good implementable tips. And then, so we talk about family and now going into like the therapist, back to the therapist themselves. How important or does it affect at all the culture or like, I know you said it's inappropriate to ask about their marital status or any sort of like personal stuff, right? But what if you do know about them? Sorry, say that again. Say that again.
It's like somebody asking me, like, what do you do when your kids can't, you can't get your kids to calm down? Like
Over
that's an
therapy them.
inappropriate question. Yeah, if we were at lunch and, we were friends, that's a completely appropriate question. But in therapy, what I do with my kids has nothing to do with what will work for your kids.
True. And so yeah, but like what if you do know that this therapist is like either had like a horrible personal relationship or is, I don't know, is like single, but nothing wrong with that, but like as someone that's going through something might view that as a different lens. How does that like affect the patient, or does it affect it at all, or how should they learn that this is a whole separate thing? And then also culture, religion, like how does that play in? Because I feel like sometimes that helps what
Right.
lens they look through. I don't know.
Right. Those are amazing questions because number one, each of us has our own personal life, right? So it's important to remember that. And how I navigate my personal life will not determine what type of therapist I am to you, right? Because I work off your belief systems, what you're doing, what you want to do. And so it has nothing to do with me. However, there are people who believe that, oh, if you're not married, then you could not relate to what I'm experiencing, right? However, additionally to that, people that are not married have experienced marriages because they have parents or because they have siblings or other people in their lives who have been married. So it's not like they're out of touch completely with what goes on in a marriage, right? And so then it's just based on how comfortable you are, right? Because you need to be comfortable with this person. And if you feel like, well, they can't help me because they're not married, then find somebody who's married if that makes you more comfortable. In terms of culture and religion, people like to, and this is just feedback I've heard from my clients, people like to find therapists of their culture or of certain religions because they feel like they don't need to explain so much, right? You know, they they feel like you're just so connected to that entity or that thing that they are too that you understand, right? And of course, if you are of a certain culture, you will understand more. But it's so important to realize that just because I'm an Indian Muslim doesn't mean that all Indian Muslims have the same culture and the same beliefs, right? And so there are still niches within that. And that's really your choice. Some people are like, I'm never going to come to you because, like, I've had a bad experience with the Indian Muslim community, and so I'm not comfortable with you. And that's okay, and I feel for them, and I hope that they can work past that. But then there's some people who are like, I'm only going to come see you because I know that you can relate to what I go through.
True, that's a good point. And sometimes that is also, it's good to have someone that's it's like therapy, right? Like where you separate a therapist from your own family and friends. Sometimes that separation of culture might even help because you have a fresh pair of eyes that are not looking through their own cultural lens, right? So that's true. I guess all goes back to what works for you and what you feel comfortable with, right?
And kind of what we were saying before, on like when you're picking your therapist, if you have those type of questions, maybe when you're looking into people, you look into somebody outside of your culture and then within your culture, to see that different experience.
Okay, and then as we wrap up, we'll just go through some of the basics. So, where do you go to find a therapist? Like, you could get a word of mouth recommendation, but if you've like, this is a whole new thing for you, and you're finally come to around and you want to do it, where do you start?
Okay, so Psychology Today is a great place to start. Most therapists advertise on Psychology Today. You can do like a zip code search and see therapists that are in your area. It like will explain you a little bit about them. You'll get access to their website. It's like just a link that you click, and they have a blurb on Psychology Today, and you can contact them directly through that. So you can email them any questions or give them a call. Whatever you feel comfortable with.
Say is the main difference between like teletherapy and being in person. Obviously with the situation today, the online is probably a little more happening a little more, which also varies which therapists you choose, like regardless of location. But what would you say are like some of the top pros and cons of both versions?
So the reason there's like benefits to both, right? It's so funny because I see in my private practice the shift of people coming in versus the amount of like online therapy individuals that are signing up for that. So the benefit of coming into the office is obviously you've carved out this time and this space to come in. The office is very therapeutic. In the waiting room, we actually moved an aquarium into the middle of our lobby so that like it
So
would promote
nice.
social distancing, but also, it's just something nice and relaxing to look at that you might not have in your home. And it's really interesting if you go to research it. Aquariums are very therapeutic, and a lot of people use them in their homes to relax. Yeah, so I mean, you get little things like that, and then obviously that face to face. There's an energy that you give off, there's an energy that I give off, and so we're able to kind of meet in that space and like share energies with each other. And you really like can read so much in person, right? I can read body language, I can read facial expressions a little bit better. There's You don't miss a beat, right, when you're in front of each other. When you do telehealth, sometimes there's little glitches, it cuts out a little bit, depending on what kind of video you're using, the quality might not be great. And so I can't see your whole body, I can only see your facial expressions. And if the quality isn't that great, you will feel the difference, right? Because you might be like sharing your whole life story and so into it. And then I'm like, excuse me, like you cut out. Would you mind
The
repeating that?
momentum.
And it's something that it's some adjustment, but sometimes it doesn't kind of promote the same environment. Does it work? Of course it works. Is it as effective? I'm not sure, but I know that it is effective. Like I have several clients who I do online. The great thing is that you have a wider reach, right? If you don't like somebody in your area, you can turn to a therapist outside of your area and just get on a video chat with them.
That's true. Those are good points because, yeah, like you said, it's ideal if you're in person. There's so much more you can pick up on, and just like how you were explaining about your space, that you create that Zen safe space for them to
Yeah.
be comfortable in. But yeah, I guess if you don't have great options near you that have worked for you, then I guess telehealth is always still a
Always,
effective option.
you can always like even talk to your therapist. How do I create that space, right? Because there's so much on color therapy, aromatherapy, and just having plants in your space that will help you achieve that environment.
Sounds amazing. I'm sure people want to do that for quarantine regardless of therapy. um, Perfect. Okay, and then pricing and sort of like frequency, like how frequent is normal, and then like I know people love to go to therapy even if they've moved past the whatever hot situation they're in, but just sort of like frequency in general, like short term, like weekly, monthly, whatever it may be, and then also long term.
So generally, if a client comes forth with an issue, we do weekly and it at least like 10 weeks, right? That will usually give you enough time to work on your issue where you'll feel the shift. Based on that, maybe something else comes up. However, there are some individuals who have, deep traumas and deep issues that go back to their childhood. And so it really just depends on you as an individual. You can talk to your therapist about that. Like, how long do you think that I'll need? And you have to be willing to put that investment. So, clients that I see that kind of have like longer, more like long term things going on, sometimes based on financial need and based on their availability too, right? Everyone's schedule is so busy. Sometimes I'll say, okay, let's meet every 2 weeks. I'll give you some homework to keep you engaged for those 2 weeks, and then we'll meet back in 2 weeks. Some clients every day for like more than a year. It depends on how much you're willing to invest, and obviously the cost plays a part. So you asked, what is cost usually like?
Like the average, like what do you expect to pay per hour? I know it varies, but I guess
Yeah,
a
so
range.
it definitely varies. So I think the lowest is around like 50, 55, and that's where I'm at right now. I really wanted to make it accessible for everybody. It's like almost like just going to get your nails done at that point. But it ranges from that to 125 to even I know that there's some therapists who are just so knowledgeable, have invested so much, and are older, and they'll charge up to $300 an hour.
I remember going to a talk here in New York when we used to have physical events still, and it was all about mental health. And they weren't psychiatrists or psychologists, but they were patient, like people that go to therapy, and they were just talking about their experiences. And I think two of the points that they highlighted was one, they would give up their skincare routine if they had to for therapy because it was just something that they enjoyed going to, even though they worked past their like said hotspot, whatever it may be. And the other thing was that there was one therapist that was sort of explaining her point of view, and she's like, a lot of times when patients come in and they don't have something that's going on that week, or they don't have something that's happening, it's almost more fruitful because you're not sort of putting out a fire. You're the other underneath, whatever's underneath the surface comes up. Yeah. So I think that yeah, that's, both of them are interesting. And yeah, like you said, it's something that you can talk about with your therapist. If the cost is an issue, it's something that you can sort of get a sort of a timeline for and plan accordingly.
And on that, actually, some therapists do sliding scale. So if you tell them, listen, I want to go to therapy, I'm like in a financial situation, what's the best you can do? Or until I find a job, can you discount the rate? And then when I do get a job, I'll give you your rate. Like people will work with you. Therapists are there to help. And as long as they, of course, make their income and have space to help, they will always help. And that's really, going on that, the duration of therapy. That's why it's so important to find that person that you connect with, because later in life, when things come up, you can connect with that same person and they already have that background. You don't have to sit and explain them everything again.
So great, thank you. So that brings us to the end of our session for today. So this is the last episode of our first mini series. So I think we plan to start the second mini series after the long weekend. So we'll post dates for that, and we'll come back on here in September. And in the meantime, you'll still see both of us online talking about different other things. And we're gonna basically edit all the videos from the last 3 sessions and have them as mini videos on IGTV as well. So you'll see that in the meantime being uploaded. And then Sakina, since we're talking about counseling and therapy, just let everyone know where they can find you if they want to find you online or in Florida.
Of course. So my website is sakinaissa.com. You can get information about me. I have blog posts that I post weekly. The latest one is actually, teaching your kids to the importance of their mask during, these times, and getting them on board with everything that's new. I know in Florida we've already started school, so it's a big thing with my little guy. Like, I have to wear my mask. And the mask is falling off, and it's things that we have to go through. So that's on my website right now. And then you can also add me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is @SakinaMFT. And I'm always posting on there different tips and things. And I'm also on Pinterest, actually. So if you ever need like a quick reference, 5 things to do, when you're feeling down or anything like that, you can check out my Pinterest. I think it's @SakinaMFT2 to get kind of little tips.
That's awesome. I think